All right, Zach, we're back. We're back on the show. Base money. You've returned.
Very glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
And unfortunately, Lauren's not with me today. She's out playing around with friends. So there's just me flying solo, and I hear the sigh of despair in the listeners as they've tuned in, and they all want to hear Lauren's first question. But
We'll
I
have to
guess
make do without.
yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to think of the kind of question she would ask you. And one of her favorite questions was, "What is your favorite thing about Bitcoin?"
That's a huge question. That's definitely a Lauren question.
Yeah.
Wow. It's changed my life. I mean, I think it's going to change everybody's life is the answer. It's um it's a new monetary standard and humanity is downstream of the money. So along with culture, I mean, they're one and the same. The culture is defined by the type of money we have. And, I mean, my favorite thing about Bitcoin is like asking the question, what's my favorite thing about money? And the answer is, well, it allows us to have all the amazing things we have in the world. And I mean, as you know, we'll get into this, but I'm working with Simply Bitcoin on a Substack, and one of our most recent articles that's coming out, I think we're going to drop it today, actually, discusses this idea of different types of money. And um, we've had gold money for like the past 4,000 years, more or less. And before that, we had these things called cowrie shells. Generally speaking, I mean, we had a lot of other things, but um, and it was really going from the cowrie shell to gold that pushed us out of the Stone Age. I mean, it's literally the thing. So, what my favorite thing about Bitcoin is that it's going to be the foundation to take us to places that we can't really even imagine. Living out in space amongst the stars. It's just the starting point of the next big step in the human evolution, the human experiment, the human experience. Uh, it's just all encompassing. That's what money is. That's what Bitcoin is as our next evolutionary step in money, as far as I can see it. And I've only spent about 7 years and about every waking hour thinking about this. So I could be wrong, but I mean I think it's sort of the general consensus, and it's just incredible when you really think about it.
Yes, mate. Uh, Impossible to answer that question, obviously. And even if you did answer it, it'd probably change again tomorrow because the epiphanies we all still to this day have, regardless of how long you've been in the rabbit hole, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. That's probably my most favorite thing. I wake up every day and I know I'm going to learn something new about how the world works, why certain people act in certain ways, how I work, why I've made certain decisions in the past, how I'm going to make certain decisions in the future. Yeah, it's intellectually stimulating, and quite frankly, it gives you so much hope and pleasure to be interacting with sound money for the first time in our lives.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. It's a tremendously big deal. I've got my head around this latest article we're going to publish. And to your point about this fixed supply money, it's such a tremendous idea, and I don't think. I mean, it's rather obvious that most people haven't wrapped their head around that. And I'll tell you how big of a deal it is. I think there was a group of people called the Neanderthals, our archaeological record shows they walked around about 50,000 years ago. Now, is this a CIA psyop? Maybe they put fake Neanderthal skeletons in the ground. I suppose that's possible. Maybe we're living in a simulation. All that's possible. All that's on the table. But putting that aside for the moment, the record shows that these others, quasi-humans walked around with us. But what also happened around that time is you see in the archaeological record these cowrie shells and these collectibles. Nick Szabo talks about this in his article, Shelling Out. And it looks to be the case that a certain type of animal, let's say our distant cousins or near cousins, started to use money about 50,000 years ago. And there's another group that did not use money about 50,000 years ago. And the reality is that that's what made the difference. That's what was the competitive advantage for us, our ability to collaborate and abstract ideas and abstract value transfer amongst us with this thing we call money. And it's so significant. It's really hard to conceptualize how big of an idea that is and how significant that was. And so, but then what happened was, and I can get into the climate change, but really quickly, that was a time during Earth when there was a large amount of ice sheets on planet Earth. And we were in the middle of an ice age. The ice core samplings, the seabed samples, as well as the orbit of the Earth around the sun, it moves back and forth over a 100,000 year period. It's fairly well established. This is all in our latest article. You can check it out. But with links and so on to support this. But anyways, the point is, that was the middle of an ice age. We came out of that ice age about 12,000 years ago, Daniel. And it was at that point in time in Earth's climate that it began to warm up considerably. And we're sort of in the tail end of that warming period now. But throughout that warming period, for thousands of years, we still use those shells. And it was only 4,000 years ago that we then moved into this metallic form of money we call gold. And that was a very significant move as well, because it gave us the ability to hold on to a money that couldn't break apart. A shell is somewhat fragile, whereas gold money is a hard money. It's a harder money, but it's still not strictly scarce like Bitcoin is, where it has a fixed supply. And the thing about money is it's not about making money. It's about earning it through providing favors and solving problems for people. It's just a scorekeeping system. It really is a social credit system at the end of the day, where I do a favor for you, Daniel, and in return, I get a coupon, a credit score, a digital entry in our decentralized ledger, a gold token, a cowrie shell. It's all the same thing. It's just a way of trying to track what we do for each other. And so to your point, this fixed supply system, it's such a earth-shattering realization, I think, for humanity. I think we're really beginning to expand our conscious mind with the understanding of what money actually is, that it's not just a gold shiny coin, but that it's just a way for us to demonstrate favors and solving problems for one another and rewarding each other for that. And, there's people like Peter Schiff, for example, who are our present day Neanderthals. They just don't understand that it doesn't need to be a shiny, beautiful yellow token. And it's just a brutal reality that some of us are wired to understand that. And there's going to be some of us that are not wired to understand that. And so, last time we spoke, I was talking about having empathy.
Mhm.
And
That's right.
because there's, on the one hand, it's unfortunate that some people aren't able to grasp, because it is an abstraction. We're dealing with something that we can't really see. We make it look like a gold token to sort of show people what it sort of represents, but that's not really what it is. And some people just can't abstract that. And they're unfortunately going to get left behind in the gene pool, but that's just part of our process of development, I would say.
And I'm gonna put. So I read one of the articles that uh, on your Substack, "Self-Interests and Incentives" is the title of that one, and
Yeah.
you've already naturally taken yourself there, and I've pulled a few quotes, and so let's delve in a little deeper because uh, here's one of the quotes. It's exactly what you're talking about. In our deep past, so you're talking about Neanderthals, some of us rose up and conquered the saber-tooths of that era because the saber-toothed tiger would have been our biggest threat, back in those days of cave dwelling and, just trying to look after ourselves, get food on the fire and protect our families, right? Saber-toothed tiger was always that shadow in the background, that thing that kept you awake at night. And so you go, and in doing so, we rose the living standards of everyone around us. So in our past, some of us rose up and conquered the saber-tooths of that era. And in so doing, we rose the living standards of everyone around us. And that's what you're saying about the people that have come to understand Bitcoin earlier than most, is what you're saying is like, okay, we can slay this fiat system that is extracting so much from us, and everything is time, obviously. That's the thing that's keeping you awake at night, basically. And you make the reference that that's the modern day saber-toothed tiger, is just this fiat monetary system. And yeah, you got me thinking about that a lot. And when you think about individualism against collectivism, you have, the collectivists that are going to say, well, it's the individuals that are greedy and self-interested, and they are the ones that are, like that holding us back as a collective. They need to be culled from the collective. Now, on a sound money, like I would say, yeah, fiat monetary systems create bad individuals because of the incentives. But I would say sound money creates strong individuals, or in an individualism built on strong ethics and morals that will end up creating a good collective as more people are attracted to that.
Yes, it's a very easy discussion to get lost in, because our good nature, uh, and given the circumstance we live in, suggests Elizabeth Warren is right. We need to tax those people their fair share, the billionaires, the Elon Musks, etc. And it makes sense that if you do a surface layer analysis, that's absolutely true. But what you find, if you go beyond the surface and you look at, well, what's the monetary system that's driving that, then you come to realize the real issue here is the centralization of the money printer. It's about this coercive monopoly. It's one thing. So I think it's important to delineate and understand the difference between a natural monopoly, like the language we're using right now. Nobody's forcing us with a gun to speak in English. We're naturally arriving at consensus that it's just easier to speak in the same language. Um, we don't have to go through border patrol, even though we might be in a different continent right now, to speak. There's no coercive monopolization going on here. But in the monetary system, it is a coercive monopoly, meaning that if you don't pay your taxes or transact in certain legal tenders, There's a gun to your head and they'll put you in a hole if you don't, or if you fight back, they'll kill you. And it's weird to understand that that's the actual reality of the situation we live in. Um, um, Consequences of Money discusses this in more detail in our Substack. But so going back to the issue at hand here, when people solve problems for other people, you pay them money, and in return, you're rewarded with more money. So as you solve problems for people, you're rewarded with money. That's what money is. That's how it functions in society. And so if you can solve more problems for more people, you're rewarded with more money. And therefore, what you're demonstrating to society is that you are a good problem solver, and therefore you have a lot of money. And now that you have that large pool of money, because you've already solved one set of problems, you're in a better position to solve more problems. Now, if you can't solve more problems, there's two things that happens here. One, you spend your money and it gets redistributed. But if you can solve another big set of problems, you get rewarded with even more money. You become a better monetary allocator. And that's a good thing for society. Another misconception here about a hard money and a fixed supply money is that the more money you hoard, the better it is for the people with the least amount of money. This is the exact opposite of what they teach us in our sort of fiat monetary system, where they tell us, no, you have to spend your money. You shouldn't hoard your money. But it's precisely the opposite. The more you hoard your money in a fixed supply system, the more you benefit the people with the least, because their purchasing power increases more relative to their stack. So it's this surface level issue of infinite supply fiat money that causes us to get confused about what the real issues are. And you need to look underneath that surface layer to understand why people like Elizabeth Warren, for example, are right at the surface layer, but they're wrong at the fundamental monetary layer, which is what we really need to fix. You can put a Band-Aid over it by taking people's money, but that's never going to be the best way to allocate money.
Yeah. And I'm going to drop another line on you from this particular article, because it's so true. On a fiat standard, we are not thriving, we are surviving.
So this is so important. And it's not well understood why a fixed supply money is so much more valuable and so much more useful than a unlimited supply money, which is the fiat system. When you have unlimited money, it forces you on this hamster wheel where you're constantly pedaling. Whereas if you have a fixed supply money, what you've earned is yours for the rest of your life. It's yours for all of time. Like, it's hard to understand for us that a gold coin today effectively has the same value as it did 3,000 years ago. The same amount. Whereas if you look at the same amount of your fiat dollars, it doesn't hold the same purchasing power. So you're in a survival mode constantly, meaning that whatever you earn, it's going to get debased and devalued and stripped of value from you without your consent, without your knowing, because you're not taught about it. And so, yeah, you're constantly in a survival mode where you can think of yourself, you have all these luxuries, you have these comforts of living, like you have a nice house, you have a couch and a sofa, and you have a TV with all sorts of channels to watch and distract you. But what you don't have is the ability to do nothing if that's what you want to do. We have so much technology, and it's so easy for us to, raise a cow and have steaks in our freezer for a year. It takes very little effort for us to do that nowadays, as opposed to 5,000 years ago, let's say. And yet we're working the same amount of time. So what's going on there? And the answer is you're surviving because you're in a system that strips the value out of your earnings on a daily basis. And you have no idea how that functions or how that happens, because you have no idea that when you put your money into the bank, it's not yours, it's theirs. When you earn the wages that you agreed upon at the beginning of the year, they're debased by 10, 20%. And over a course of 10 and 20 years, you're getting poorer with time. You're not earning the work you're putting in. It's a beautiful system for those that understand it and benefit from it, which is a small minority of people. And it's a terrible system for 99% of the world. And I will say, before we get into a conspiracy here, it's also sort of the natural progression, I would say, in the sense that you could make the argument that this is all a well-planned, well-oiled machine, but the reality is, if you step back at the historical record, we used shell money, and we were living in caves relatively recently, 10,000 years ago. It sounds like a very, very long time, but historically speaking, anatomically speaking, we're effectively more or less the same creatures. We've just been able to innovate so greatly over the last 10,000 years. And so it's easy to get trapped in the mindset that, well, this is all a well-oiled plan that they've come up with from the beginning. And the fact is, we've sort of stumbled our way into this, and now we're all just waking up and realizing, oh my gosh, we can do all of these transactions for free effectively. We can fix the supply of money. This is so, dumb. I mean, it's like a caveman living, but we only realize that after we see this innovation we call Bitcoin. So I kind of rambled on there, but the point is, Bitcoin is it's enlightening. It changes your perception and allows you to see things that you couldn't otherwise see before. All of us, I think, probably yourself included, Daniel, we have the same mind. We're of the same body and the same heart we were before Bitcoin, but we did not see all of this stuff before. Mm-hmm. So it really is a mind expanding experience, and a healthy one, and one that's sustainable, I think, because it's like learning how to ride a bicycle. You didn't realize you could do it before, but now you can zoom around a lot faster down the streets effortlessly. And once you ride the bike, it's so easy. Like, why wouldn't you ride a bicycle around versus walking? And Bitcoin, in some respects, is the same way. It's so obvious in hindsight that it's a better process. But yeah.
So I liked that. What's that turn of phrase you used in the article? Fiatsplaining. How you find yourself having to fiat-splain your way out of an argument to kind of defend, what it is that you do for a living. And, I had flashbacks of when I was working in financial markets, foreign exchange in particular, rent seeking, with the very best of them as a broker. Yeah. Sucking straight from the teat of the Cantillon effect, the spigot of money, and having to fiat-splain to other people, like, what is it that you do for a living? And well, okay, well, you're one of those guys, are you? And having to defend myself and my decisions and what got me there in the first place to have that job. And this is one of those hard-hitting parts of the article where you talk about the ethical perspective, and some people might not even be aligned with the job that they are doing. But as you point out, ethics get thrown out the window when the need for money to survive sits atop of our, subjective values. Like, that doesn't matter that I don't agree with what's going on here right now in my office, or the regulations that now tell me I've got to do this, that, and the other thing. And you use a few examples, and one that is really, it stands out, and I'm not picking on them in any stretch of the imagination, would be, the doctor that is sitting there prescribing a drug to a kid that he probably knows is going to do more damage over the long term than good, but he doesn't have their best interest at heart. At that point, he has his own best interest and his own family's best interest at that point, because the incentive structure in which we have been, well, that you would say we've stumbled into rather than been subjugated to. That there's arguments on both sides of that. Therein lies the nature of fiat money and these incentives that drive this decision making and this ability to throw away one's ethics when the need to survive is just so great.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back to the Corona issue, going on 4 years now, it opened up a lot of people's eyes, and I'm certain, I mean, I know firsthand that there's doctors that disagreed with the procedure, with the policy, who would lose their license, who would have lost their license, who had a mortgage and a family. I mean, what decision are they going to make? They only have one option. You probably heard Fauci himself. Recently, there was some audio of him released talking about how if you put enough pressure on people, they're going to do it. So you put people in these situations where they have no other option other than to comply. And, they have you by the balls. You've got a large student loan debt. You got a mortgage debt because you want a good family for yourself and your kids and your significant other. And you're trying to do everything right. You follow what they tell you to do. And it's just not going to be in your best interest. So you're going to do what you have to do to survive, even if it goes against your own moral compass or your ethical beliefs. And you can't understand or make sense of that situation unless you can begin to understand what's driving it. And what's driving it is a centralized money printer that has kickbacks and ties to the whole system above you, all the administrative policy making that's going on above you, the hospital you work at, the hedge fund that owns you. All of it's tied to whether or not you're going to get another loan, whether or not you're going to be able to get more financing. It's all connected to the money printer. And for those that don't know, a loan is printed money. There's nothing, you're not taking funds from one location and moving it to another location when you're getting a loan. It's just you're creating money from nothing with that loan in the fiat system. And that goes for all countrywide. The IMF had stipulations. If you give out these jabs, we're going to refinance you. If you don't, we're not going to finance you, and or we're going to whack you, as some African presidents had happened to them. It's the reality of the situation we live in. And so you're, again, going back to, are you thriving or are you surviving? The answer is you're surviving, because you're doing things that you wouldn't otherwise want to do. You don't want to go out there and risk your life or risk somebody else's life in order to collect your meal. But that's what we're forced to do. What we would rather do is sit here and have nice conversations, with friends and family, and discuss more important matters other than risking our lives or somebody else's lives. Instead of risking lives, why don't we look at, how can we build beautiful things and develop new technology and push ourselves further? But instead, we're fighting with each other, against ourselves, against our better judgment, in order to put food on our tables. And it's tragic. Again, the lockdown showed a lot of people the reality of the situation. And unfortunately, we're going to have more of that before it gets better. I fear. We'll see what happens with some of these state governments, whether they have the wherewithal, the courage to implement Bitcoin standards, Bitcoin strategic reserves. You know, the systems in place are certainly not interested in competition, and Bitcoin is the ultimate competition for these guys. And you know, it's going to win one way or another. It would be nice if we can go about it in a peaceful transition. It's an individual by individual process. So, you know, as you and I well know, Bitcoin doesn't change. You know, Bitcoin changes you, and as it touches more and more of these policymakers, I think you're going to see the tables tilt more and more in favor of Bitcoin simply out of self-preservation, because they can't compete against this thing. You're dealing with a decentralized animal that doesn't sleep and only gets stronger with chaos and with courageous people. I mean, it's just designed and built to become the next form of money. And and because of that, people that are making these terrible decisions for themselves, they're going to find Bitcoin and they're going to realize, oh, okay, I don't need to do things against my better judgment. Maybe I won't be a licensed doctor, for example. Maybe I'll be an unlicensed doctor, you know, and I'll practice holistic medicine. Maybe it won't be as profitable, because guess what? There isn't profits in holistic medicine, because the truth of the matter is you just need to eat well, get some sunshine, and go for a walk. It's not complicated, but they're not going to tell you that, because they don't have the incentive to tell you that, because they can't make money telling you that. So it's just misaligned incentives, and it really starts with the money printer and ends with the money printer.
Yeah, and again, I'm pulling from the article. Until you understand that monopolized money printing is not only unnecessary, but is the primary root cause of essentially all of your economic troubles in this world, you will never find peace in this life. And that is so key, mate. I want to say that again. You will never find peace in this life. That is so hard hitting. That is so profound, because, you know, our time here on this planet, in this realm, whatever, wherever you're coming from, like, you know, whatever language you want to use, our time is so fleeting. And like, you know, you referenced before the human experiment or the human experience. Again, use whatever language you want. Peace is universally understood. And your mind, yourself, your soul, you will not find peace until you understand that the monopolized money printing is not only unnecessary, but is the primary root cause of all your economic troubles. And your economic troubles are because we are Homo economicus. Like, you know, ever since we started exchanging those cowrie shells, we moved up. You know, like, it's not a financial revolution, it's a financial evolution. We are a species evolving each time we do that. And we evolved that very moment by using cowrie shells, and we're evolving now into the digital age. And as we evolve, only right now there is the few. And as we were talking about earlier, individualism against collectivism. Look at those individuals that did stand up against, like, the medical tyranny, that did see it. They saw through that, and it wasn't particularly Bitcoin that made them see that. It was just their own ethics and moral standing. That was just too, you know, that was just a line they could not cross. Look what happened. They got cancelled. They got thrown off the list. They got absolutely raked over the coals. They were taken down from social media sites. And the collective, the fiat collective, reigns supreme once more. And it's just, until we turn this upside down and have people understand that, you know, the money printing, like, money is not the root of all evil. Money printing is the root of all evil, is kind of, I think, what we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, 100%. It's hard to understand that when your day job is trying to figure out how you can collect more money because everything keeps getting more expensive. And once you realize it's because there's more money in the system, that's why prices go up. But you have to break through. I'll just share something personal with my progress through this whole understanding of what Bitcoin and money is that we have a system in place. I think it's global. I think it's human nature, where there's a tendency to trust and obey, to comply, out of our better nature, just out of our human nature. There's a leader, and then, there's somebody that tells you how things are, and you follow more or less. And it works out great most of the time. But when you have a situation where there's nefarious people at the top who understand that money printing is not a good thing for everybody else, then it becomes a bad situation. And personally speaking, the way I was able to break through that, it really started when I looked at religious text in a new light. Robert Breedlove and Luke Wolf had a podcast series on the What is Money. I think they were discussing Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning.
Correct. Yeah.
And they looked at these religious texts in a new sort of, again, beyond surface level, talking about it not necessarily literally, but in ways that we can understand as men trying to navigate the world. We all have these same feelings and emotions, and when they were speaking about it in those terms, without this dogma, let's say, putting aside the different brands, whether it's Buddhism or Islam or Christianity or whatever it might be, there's universal lessons in those stories. And then you come to realize, or at least for me personally, the way we use words and language is very strict. It's like caged. I don't know a better way to say it, but if you can sort of allow your mind to not necessarily accept the framing of the way people tell you things, and you really just need to allow yourself the flexibility to effectively just think on your own terms. Like, does that make sense to me, what these people are saying? Would they have a reason to be lying to me or telling me half truths? Because a lot of times these effective lies and deceptions are premised upon a kernel of truth. I mean, and that's what makes them very effective. Just going back to Liz Warren talking about wanting to tax the billionaires, there's a kernel of truth in there, because they should not have these monopolies on these ideas and having the rest of us pay for it. And but once you sort of can free your mind from this conditioning of trust and obey what the authority tells me, and give yourself the again, the courage and the just the self-assurance that you have a brain in your head too, and you can think through this stuff too. It's not complicated. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's very not complicated. And it's as simple as he who has the money printer sets the rules, and he won't tell you about that because that's how he makes his money. And that's how he protects his family. And that really is the saber-toothed tiger that we're killing, Daniel. We're standing up with our faces publicly to say we're not gonna accept this anymore. It's just that simple. Period. We do not need a monetary system that's elastic, as the fiat-splainers will try to convince us. What we need is a monetary system that's fixed, because only then can you properly transfer value from one person to another. because that transaction is occurring at a set point in time, and that value transfer ought to stay and remain for the history of time. You can't. What happens when you print money is you're tearing up the agreements of all previous transactions that have occurred effectively. So you're canceling everybody when you print money. That's what you're doing. You're effectively canceling everybody in every transaction every time you loan money out by printing money. So we're gonna explain to everybody that this is the saber-toothed tiger of our age, and it's going to be a great thing. It's already a great thing. Every person that comes into this, with the exception of a few people that lose their minds, who realize that they can't control it, Craig Wright to name one, the majority of people are sane, well-intended, well-meaning people. And when they find Bitcoin, they realize, oh my God, all of that was bullshit. And the first thing you want to do is fight. The first thing you want to do is attack, because you think, oh, these people, how could they be so evil? But the reality is they're just midwits like myself, who are just stumbling along with the narrative, trust and obey. And then you wake up one day and you realize, holy shit, that was all bullshit. And it's an incredible, what we really need is like Bitcoiners Anonymous, where what we need to do is we need to get people like, there's some folks out there who are quite aggressive with their talk, Bitcoiners, prominent Bitcoiners, and rightly so to some extent, because there is some nefarious people out there. But to a very large degree, most of the people that support the current system, they have no clue. And they're doing their best, thinking they're doing their best. I wouldn't even be surprised if Jerome Powell doesn't know. He probably does, but he probably doesn't know that there's a better solution. I mean, you have very smart people that look at Bitcoin and they can't conceptualize a fixed supply, ledger-based money makes the best sense. But again, they're just going to get culled from the gene pool. It is what it is.
I've often thought about this because, how many people at the Federal Reserve, or for example, the Bank of England, or, any of the central banks around the world, or Bank of International Settlements, are just employees, just winging through.
A lot of them.
A lot of them, exactly. I mean, how many people does the Bank of England employ? I mean, thousands. A friend of mine, he's worked in their tech department, and like works on their trading floor and make sure all the computers are running and whatever else. And so he probably had a pretty shitty week this week with everything going down. He's just doing his job. But he's not read The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins. He's not read The Creature from Jekyll Island from Ed Griffin. And I wonder, honestly, I do wonder, if you put that book, Jerome Powell, Bernanke, any of them from the past, Yellen, Greenspan, got them in the room, you're like, all right, hands up. What went down 1910? Anyone know? Jekyll Island. Does anybody know that there was a meeting, like a top secret meeting? And I wonder, would they know or not? Have they been briefed on the way in?
What happened to the Titanic?
Right. Yeah. Had they been briefed on the way in? It's like, right, guys, listen. We've been running this racket since 1913, Christmas week. And you guys just have to keep it going. Because, do any of them know? Do any of them know that Nelson Aldrich, who was the guy that held the meeting at 1910 and assembled all of those brainiacs there and got Paul Warburg across, he had to host Paul Warburg. He wasn't invited. Let's put it that way. He was sent on behalf of certain family interests. Would he have any idea that would Powell have any idea that Aldrich's daughter married John D. Rockefeller Jr. and that Nelson Rockefeller is named after Nelson Aldrich? Do people listening to this now have any idea? And this is where people are like, all right, I want to err on the side of caution here and just throw all of this information over there as a conspiracy theory, regardless of the fact it's well documented, and I could probably find all of this on Wikipedia, pick up a book, which you can, by the way, in the books mentioned, and even the Wikipedia page of any one of those people I just mentioned. You can just follow the family tree. Do they know? Or you got home, hey honey, guess what? I just got the job. I'm the chair of the Fed. Can you believe it? Let's pop open a bottle of champagne. Good times ahead for us. Like,
I'm afraid to say it's definitely the latter in the majority of the cases. I mean, who knows whether or not, who knows that George Sr.'s father financed the Nazis? I mean, who knows about that? There's so much crazy, not crazy. There's so much. There's so much obvious family relations that are the centers of power, because money being the most important institution of humanity, it, if anything, was required to be publicly taught, it would be that, and it would only be that. It is the central most, it's the only institution that humanity needs. I mean, it's what we're based, it's what defines us as a species. And yet we go out of our way not to talk about it. It's not a coincidence by any stretch of the imagination. It's most indeed consciously pushed out of the public forum, and actively so, because there's people with a money printer that will pay whoever they need to make sure it stays out of the public forum, out of the discussion. And so that way people like Jay Powell don't have any clue what the reality of the situation is. This is what's so crazy, Daniel. Let me just put this out there. Okay. Money is the governance policy of humans. Okay. If you want something, you take your money and you buy the thing you want. What you just did is you signaled to the market that that producer needs to make more of that thing. It's that simple. If you don't have any money and you want something, you go work for it, or you go work for somebody else. And where do you work? You work at a place that aligns with your values. Do you know why it's so expensive to find a hitman for hire? Because nobody is interested in performing the job, nor in asking for the job done, because nobody wants it. But there's a market price, not because it's legal or illegal, but because people generally don't want to go through that process. That's all there is to it. It has nothing to do with the laws written down. I'll give you another example. Do you know why it's pretty easy to get a hamburger? Not because there's a law that dictates it, but because people like to eat hamburgers. And because people like to eat hamburgers, they'll spend their money, and there's producers that will produce them in large quantities. Money is the governance structure of humans, but we pretend like it's not, and we pretend like there's these things called democracies and monarchies and dictators and socialism and communism, etc., etc. All that is window dressing for groups of thieves, A, and B, dim-witted and well-intended, useful idiots to pretend that that's not the case. It's uncomfortable to talk about, A, because nobody talks about it, B, because nobody realizes that's the case, and C, because the people that understand that that's the case make sure you don't understand that that's the case. That's the reality of the situation we're living in. Money is the supreme important product of humanity. It's like our number one most valuable good. And if anything is deserved of being discussed and talked and taught, It's money and what it is and how it serves its purpose for humanity. But guess what? Nobody's talking about that. Clearly, there's a reason for that. And there's a sinister reason for that.
Man, and then now you're leading me there, aren't you? To the
But I don't want to go there because there's a lot of good people that don't understand that are working for those people. And we are here to help spread to the 99% of the world that are working for those people that don't realize they're working for those people.
Yeah.
They're just well intended, like you and I.
But the problem
we just happen to understand fixed supply works.
Yeah. Problem is everyone's working for those people, even though you think you're not. And a perfect example, a school teacher. And I see this because there are Bitcoiners now. There's a handful of Bitcoiners in the UK, teachers, who would there's a math teacher. There's a couple of math teachers I know. Like one is on the verge of just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I cannot be teaching this in this way, in this style. And look, think of economics teachers, like safe, perfect example. Like how can you stand there and teach the Keynesian drivel that you are forced to teach and then fiat-splain your way out of that just because you are 45 years of age and you've got 15 years until you get your state pension? Or you're a biology teacher and you're teaching a group of 13-year-old kids that there are 3 genders now, and you got a PhD in biology. Now this is, because you are enslaved and you are working for the people who are printing the money because they own you. Because 100%. The minute you turn around and say, this is bullshit, I can't teach this, not in my classroom, no way in the world, you're gone. You're out of there and it's over. And this is, another example, like we were talking about doctors earlier, and now we're talking about teachers. You can apply this to any sector, anywhere, whatever it is that you're working in. Maybe you're working in a factory and you're keeping machines running that are, producing goodness knows what, microplastics or fizzy drinks or, whatever, something that steals from humanity rather than, you work, honestly, believe me, it's tough because it all comes from there. And you were talking earlier about another thing that kind of crossed my mind, a kernel of truth, that kernel of truth in what Elizabeth Warren was saying. And I don't know who to attribute this to, but I heard this or read it recently. A half truth is far more dangerous or damaging, I can't remember, than an outright lie. Yeah, and they know that too. Yeah, they're the master of psyops.
Yes, correct. 100%, 1000%. So here's a big epiphany for me recently, Daniel, is that, and this is, again, back to your question, what do you love about Bitcoin? 100%. It's just mind expanding every day. And so, money is an idea, right? Speech is an idea. Labor is an idea. Like the way developing the ability to do something uniquely or in an innovative way, these all start out as ideas. And if you go back to when glass started, all right, the creation of glass. So there's a town in Italy. They had Moran, is that what it is? Marino. They had master glass makers there, and they had a trade secret to develop that mask, that glass. Excuse me. And you wouldn't learn the final secret ingredients about exactly what to put in the mixture to make that glass until you had been there for 50 years. It's a trade secret, right? And these things are well understood. Trade secrets. It's one thing to have a secret about an idea and keep it to yourself, but it's a whole nother thing to lock up these ideas behind state-sponsored violence. So the idea of patents, intellectual property, legal tender laws, uh, how you can get to heaven through the proper religious church. All of these are just like locked up ideas. And if you think about them in that way, that's recently for me a good way to think about how to control large populations. Like back to what you're saying, like they're good at it. They're good at keeping these things locked up. If you can think about it from the idea perspective, meaning that when Martin Luther put his 95 Theses up in the 1500s, what he was effectively saying was, you're not going to gatekeep how I want to be religious anymore. So that idea is what was gatekept, the religious doctrines. And today, what's being gatekept is the idea of money or speech, once again, through like YouTube and canceling people on Facebook, etc. It's if you can control ideas and how people think, it's very, very powerful. I mean, it's tremendously valuable. And so what we have to do as a community, as humanity, to step forward and push Bitcoin, it's open sourced for a reason. There's no secrets there. The idea is not locked up behind a paywall. It's 100% open and available to everybody. Because the thing about ideas is the more people use them, the better it is for everybody. It's like a telephone network. The more people have one, the easier it is to share ideas and to build cool stuff. There's this misconception that goes around that, well, it's for your safety, Daniel. Because if people started having phone calls across continents like this, ideas can get shared, and those are very dangerous. Bad people could get them. Well, the reality is it's the bad people that already have control of the ideas, and they're keeping them from you. It's projection. It's 100% projection. So nobody's waking up in the morning. This is a great example I like to use. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, you know what? I think today's the day I'm going to go find me some Russians and kill them. I'm pretty sure there's nobody in Russia waking up today saying, you know what? I'm going to get me some Americans today. Nobody does that. Nobody does that in China. Nobody does that in Africa. Nobody does that in South America. Nobody does that in Europe. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says to themselves, you know what? After my coffee, I'm going to see if I can go find me some foreigners and kill them. Nobody does that. It's absurd on its face to think, well, we got to be careful because the criminals can yada, yada, yada. It's a half truth. And that half truth is that you're the ones that are telling us that are the criminals because you're locking this stuff up from us. And they have well-intended Karens, bleeding hearts support them. And they have people, the rest of the population is like, this is full of you're full of shit. I'm not even going to play along. But they got the game fixed because they print the money so they can fund everybody to keep this thing going. So what we need is a sly roundabout way to take their value from them and lock it up for ourselves.
Yeah, love it. And nice rant. So here it goes. Like to reference again what you were saying here. Unfortunately for the bankers, Bitcoin has birthed itself into their world, and us peasants that have taken it, that have a keen nose for bullshit, that have seen through the bankers' marketing facade and understand precisely what is taking place, have already shifted all of our wealth into the superior technology in anticipation of the inevitable outcome. And that again ties into what we were talking about. Like, that is an individualist effort right? For you to fall down the rabbit hole, to do the research, to find the conviction, to make those arrangements to shift out of this fiat monetary system into the Bitcoin one. And that's when the change starts happening. That's when the blinkers come off. That's when you can really start seeing the bigger picture and thinking clearer and making better economic decisions, which, as we've already discussed, is what we are. Economic decision making, problem solving machines. We've had all of that taken away from us because we've been forced to use the fiat currency of your country's choice, of your, incumbent country's dictator, benevolent dictator, overlord, whatever, feudal king's choice, that you have to work for in order to be a part of a society that is, in essence, just sick because it hasn't had the chance to flourish. Everything has been nipped in the bud. Every idea that you've ever had, every entrepreneurial endeavor that you could and should have taken action on, you didn't.
Stay in your hole, peasant. Stay in your hole. It's quite unfortunate when you see it for what it is. But there's hope because there is a solution now, and it is Bitcoin. It is indeed inevitable. It's inevitable because you understand it at a personal level. As you said, it's an individual thing. It wasn't the group that stood up in the cave and attacked the saber-tooth. There was one dude or two dudes that had the courage and the balls to go after this thing and kill it and end its life. And, that's baked into us Bitcoiners, right? Like, we are the ones who are risking it all, so to speak, to raise the boats of everybody because it's just such a superior technology to have a fixed monetary system. And that's the reality. It's an individual effort. And the more individuals learn about it, it eventually becomes an inevitable force. So yeah, it's
well, you got all that off your chest, and that's just one article that we went through.
Yeah.
You guys have been busy. How many articles do you have up there?
Well, we do about one a week, more or less. We try to publish a new article on Monday, every Monday.
Who's doing the writing and the brainstorming and what's the workflow? Who's behind this?
Yeah, I'm probably the primary person involved. We have a few people on the team. It's Simply Bitcoin's growing pretty big, so there's quite a few people on the team, but I handle a lot of the editing and quite a bit of the writing as well. And but yeah, we try to get an article out every Monday, and it discusses all of these topics. It talks about things like being greedy and why it's good. All the things that you've been told are bad. For example, there's an article we have recently about how making donations is a terrible idea, how being charitable is a terrible idea. It's super counterintuitive, but it's it's a fresh perspective on things. And so we try to shake off the cobwebs of everybody's minds and help them think clearly, as you said. But so like every Monday, we try to publish a new article. I think we got like 12,000 or so subscribers at this point. And it's a free subscription. So you'll get a new article, once a week in the mailbox. If you drop any email address, that's all we need. So you can make up an email address if you want to stay anonymous, as you ought to. There's no reason to put yourself out there because we all know how valuable Bitcoin's going to be. So we've been going now. I think we've got about 2 years worth of articles stacked up. They're about 10-minute reads, 10 to 15-minute reads each one. And so if you want some inspirational stuff, if you want some insightful stuff, yeah, that's kind of what we're doing over there.
And this is in tandem with Nico on the podcast.
Yeah, yep.
All part of the
Yeah.
same thing. Love
Opti puts together awesome artwork and thumbnails for us on the articles, and yeah, we try to push them out every Monday morning.
Yeah, and you got one. Yeah, it's just dropped. Money, the story of humanity, which just dropped as we were chatting about 45 minutes ago. So that's the latest one out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very good, mate. So yeah, am I right in thinking last time we spoke, you may have still had a foot in fiat land? I can't remember. Are you still juggling? Have you managed to escape? What's the latest?
I am still there, begrudgingly, and boy, it's
That's got to be tough after everything we just talked about. Like, yeah,
brother, it's interesting. I shouldn't even tell you, but I'm involved in international tax planning. Is that wild or what?
wild. It's wild. Well, we
I
got a
mean,
sleeper on the inside.
that's
That's the
how I
first
like to
thing.
look at it. That's how I like to look at it. You would be surprised how many people there are orange pilled um, within the people I work with. Um, it's Stephen Kinsella is another sort of example there where he's a phenomenal IP attorney, but he hates patents and he thinks they're a terrible thing. So I sort of play the same role in the tax world. Um, but yeah, I it's it's a challenge, Daniel.
And I remember as well, and you don't have to share. I think we had a conversation before, and kind of ex-military background too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had a pretty interesting job in the military as well. Yeah.
Because
Was
I've had the Bitcoin veterans on, and many people actually. Kyle as well from Pleb Labs talked about it. Even Preston has talked about his military days as well. Um,
Yeah.
Heavily armed clown, another one that comes to mind. Uh, yeah, it was hard enough for me, like I said at the beginning of this, to realize, once I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and twigged everything, that you can't help but look back on your past life and then look through a Bitcoin lens at that, and being part of the financial markets. But like the military stuff, like being part of, like, literally the psyop of all psyops in some cases, and being deployed and sent over, and seeing some of the horrific things that you had to endure, like that. I can't imagine. That must be a very tough part of the Bitcoin rabbit hole journey.
Yeah. I had a I had it was an instructor position. Um, so I was stateside, but yeah, there was a lot of cross-trained guys that were from kind of special operator areas like rangers and things like that. But I never had to go over and get into that kind of stuff. But um, one thing, I guess, one takeaway, just to share one takeaway from government work is that um, the level of incompetence and fraud and waste and abuse is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty staggering. It's a paperwork process over there where you check a box, you tick the right thing, and they send you through, and nobody asks a question or an eyebrow is raised. And knowing that, sort of knowing how the government works, it's sort of no surprise how it's impossible that there's a big conspiracy going on, to some extent, because it's just sort of bumbling and fumbling around. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's certain things about military operations like chain of command and when shit hits the fan, like how to operate in those sort of intense environments for sure. And I would say military folks, at least like I say in the operating side of things, are, well trained in that area. But anyways, yeah, it was an experience to be there. And uh I think there's a place that, so another thing that Saif brings about in his book Principles of Economics, we wrote an article on his book, and if you haven't read that book, it's fantastic. I highly encourage people to get that. He talks about the ability to privatize security. And I think, there's a lot of being in the military and working with some of those operators. There's, men that have a warrior capability within them more so than other people. And, they're just, some of them are designed to provide that service, and they're willing and able. And not in a bad way, but in a good way. You know what I mean? So like to provide appropriate application there where need be. So, yeah, I've got a lot of mixed feelings on all that, but yeah, I did some service.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. I hope. Have you been on the Bitcoin Veterans one? Have they had you on to talk about your articles and stuff?
I have not yet. No.
That's one. I'll put you in contact. I'm sure they'd love to have you on. I had Gabe on, and he was talking about his past, and he worked on. In the end, he was working on the recruitment side, and
Okay.
yeah. So talk about that dark question. It's like I'm sitting in front of an 18-year-old kid and his parents, and I'm trying to sell him the dream of war and stuff. Yeah, it's
Brutal.
tough. And we've all been trapped. We've all been trapped in these fiat roles that we've had to fiat explain ourselves out of, as we talked about for the last hour or so. All right, so we'll wrap this one up because we've done a big job on that particular article, and I want to get people across to come and find you. And where should they, what's the best way to interact with you and go find these articles? What's the best way to do that? And then I'll ask you the final question.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at _base_money. I think that's my latest handle. I burn my Twitter account every now and again just to keep it low key. But where people should go is simplybitcoin.news. Simplybitcoin.news. You'll find our Substack. And again, it's just put in. You don't even have to put in an email address. You can just look at our articles without subscribing, or you can drop in a random email address and you can subscribe, and we'll send you a weekly article to keep you based in base money and the peaceful revolution that is Bitcoin.
Awesome. Well, if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
So last time you asked me this, Daniel, my answer was my wife. And I must say we've made big strides in that department.
Well
and every now and again she'll be like, don't they know this is because of the money printing? So it's been a long journey, but she's come along. So I can't use that one. I would say I'll keep it simple. We'll go with Orange Man. I think if I could give an orange pill, I'd give it to Orange Man, Trump, and with the idea that if he gets into office and maintains his ability to live and breathe and function. Um, I think he could do, a Bitcoin strategic reserve would be a big step in the peaceful revolution process, and maybe even avoid some systemic collapse, which would be a bad outcome to hyperinflate us, which is probably what a lot of people, that seems to be where we're heading. That's sort of the accelerate camp. Nothing stops this train, as Lynn Alden would like to say. And the dollar needs something to hyperinflate into, and it looks like it's going to be Bitcoin. It would be nice if the U.S. could set an example amongst Western nations, if you will. I don't really like to use that term, but nation states in general, because I think that would help reduce the fallout from this fiat money printing indebtedness up to our eyeballs. We're all in. So yeah, if I had one to give, I'd go with Trump. I'd go with Orange Man.
All right. Well, good to hear it, mate. And look forward to reading this latest article that's just dropped, and I'll get this out to the world as soon as I can, and they can come and find you.
Awesome. Thanks a
Take
lot,
care,
Daniel.
brother.
You too.